The sky was a traitor that day, a churning beast of gray and black that swallowed our plane whole. I clung to the controls, my knuckles white, as the Cessna shuddered against the storm's fury. "We're going down, Riley," I screamed, my voice barely cutting through the howl of wind and the screech of failing engines. My name is Alex Carter, and I'm a 28-year-old pilot for a small cargo company in Colorado. Flying is my life, has been since I was a kid staring up at the endless blue, dreaming of freedom. But freedom doesn't mean much when you're plummeting toward a mountain with Riley Harper, the one person I'd rather see fall off a cliff than share a cockpit with. Riley, with her perfect blonde hair and sharper-than-a-knife attitude, had been my rival since the day we met at flight school. She's 29, a better navigator than I'll ever admit, and the kind of woman who can make you feel small with a single glance. We'd been at each other's throats for years, petty arguments over routes, schedules, who deserved the promotion we both wanted. Now, fate had us strapped into the same doomed plane, and the irony wasn't lost on me. The storm came out of nowhere, a freak beast born in the Rockies. One minute, we were hauling medical supplies to a remote clinic. The next, lightning was clawing at the sky, and our engine was coughing like a dying man. "Pull up, Alex," Riley yelled, her voice tight with panic as she wrestled with the co-pilot controls. I didn't need her to tell me twice, but the plane had other ideas. A gust slammed us sideways, and the world spun. Metal screaming, alarms blaring, my heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. We hit the mountain hard, the impact rattling my bones. The nose crumpled, glass shattered, and then silence. Just the hiss of wind and the distant rumble of thunder. I came to with blood trickling down my temple, the taste of iron in my mouth. The cockpit was a wreck, wires dangling like veins, the windshield a spiderweb of cracks. Riley was slumped in her seat, her face pale but breathing. Thank God, or maybe curse him, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be stuck with her. I unbuckled my harness, wincing as pain shot through my ribs, and stumbled out into the snow. The plane had lodged itself into a rocky outcrop, perched precariously on a slope. One wrong move, and we'd slide into the abyss below. "Riley, wake up," I shouted, shaking her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, green and piercing, and for a moment, I saw something raw in them. Fear, maybe, or something softer. Then her usual scowl snapped into place. "Get your hands off me, Carter," she snapped, shoving me back. Classic Riley. Even half dead, she'd rather bite than accept help. "We're alive, but we're screwed," I said, pointing to the wreckage. No radio, no beacon, and a storm that's not letting up. We're stuck here until someone finds us. Riley's jaw tightened as she surveyed the damage, her breath visible in the freezing air. "Great. Trapped with you. Just what I needed." Her voice dripped with venom, but her hands shook as she checked her gear. She was scared, and so was I, but admitting it felt like handing her a weapon. The first night was hell. We salvaged what we could, blankets, a first aid kit, some protein bars, and huddled in the cargo hold, the only part of the plane still intact. The wind screamed outside, rattling the fuselage like a tin can. I patched up my head wound with gauze, and Riley stitched a gash on her arm with a needle and thread from the kit, her face grim but steady. "You're not half bad at this," I said, trying to lighten the mood. She shot me a look that could have frozen the storm itself. "Don't patronize me, Alex. I don't need your approval." I bit back a retort. This was how it always went with us. Every word a jab, every glance a challenge. But as the night wore on, the cold forced us closer, our shoulders brushing under the thin blankets. I hated how aware I was of her sharp intake of breath, the way her fingers curled into fists to hide her trembling. I told myself it was just survival instinct, nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. There was something about Riley Harper that had always gotten under my skin, and not just because I couldn't stand her. By dawn, the storm had eased, but the sky was still a bruise of clouds. We were high up, maybe 10,000 feet, surrounded by jagged peaks and endless snow. No signal, no rescue in sight. "We need to move," I said, scanning the horizon. "There's a ranger station a few miles west. If we can get there, we might have a chance." Riley nodded, her face unreadable. "Fine. But don't expect me to hold your hand, Carter." We packed what we could carry: food, water, a flare gun with one shot, and started down the mountain. The terrain was brutal, all loose rock and hidden crevasses. My ribs ached with every step, and Riley limped from a twisted ankle she wouldn't admit to. We didn't talk much, just kept moving, our breaths puffing in the frigid air. But every so often, I caught her glancing at me, her eyes searching for something I couldn't name. It made my chest tighten in a way I didn't want to think about. Halfway down, we hit a frozen stream, the ice slick and treacherous. I went first, testing each step. "Careful," I called back, but Riley was already moving, too stubborn to listen. Her foot slipped, and she went down hard, sliding toward a drop-off. My heart stopped. Without thinking, I lunged, grabbing her wrist and yanking her back. We collapsed in a heap, her body pressed against mine, our breaths mingling. For a second, neither of us moved. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and unguarded, and I felt something shift, a crack in the wall we'd built between us. "Thanks," she muttered, pulling away fast, like she'd been burned. I nodded, my throat tight, and we kept going. But that moment lingered, heavy and unspoken, like the storm clouds still hanging over us. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing: being trapped with Riley Harper was about to change everything. The mountain didn't care about our feud, and neither did the cold. It clawed at us, sinking into our bones as we trudged through knee-deep snow. Every step was a battle, and Riley's limp was getting worse, though she'd rather die than admit it. I kept my eyes on the horizon, searching for any sign of the ranger station. The map in my head said it was close, but close at 10,000 feet felt like a cruel joke. My ribs screamed with every breath, and the cut on my forehead throbbed under the makeshift bandage. Riley wasn't much better off. Her arm was swollen where she'd stitched it, and her face was pale, her lips chapped and cracking. But she kept pace, her jaw set, her eyes fixed ahead like she could will the station into existence. "Why do you hate me so much?" I asked, breaking the silence. The question slipped out before I could stop it, born of exhaustion and the nagging weight of her presence. Riley stopped, her boots crunching in the snow, and turned to face me. Her eyes were sharp, but there was something else there, something raw and unguarded. "You really want to know?" she said, her voice low, almost dangerous. "Because you act like you're God's gift to aviation, Alex. Like you're the only one who belongs in the sky." Her words hit like a punch. I opened my mouth to fire back, but she kept going. "You strut around, always so sure of yourself, never giving an inch. You think I don't see how you look at me? Like I'm some obstacle you need to crush." Her voice cracked, and she turned away, her shoulders rigid. I stood there, stunned. I'd always thought Riley was the one looking down on me, with her perfect navigation scores and her icy confidence. Had I been wrong this whole time? "I don't hate you," I said finally, my voice softer than I meant it to be. You make me feel like I'm not enough." It was the truth, raw and ugly, and saying it felt like peeling back a layer of skin. Riley didn't respond, just kept walking, but I saw her shoulders relax, just a fraction. The day stretched on, brutal and endless. We found a small cave to rest in, a hollow carved into the rock face. It was barely big enough for both of us, but it shielded us from the wind. We sat close, sharing a protein bar and the last of our water. The silence wasn't hostile anymore, but it was heavy, filled with things neither of us was ready to say. "Remember flight school?" Riley said suddenly, her voice quiet. "That night we stayed up late, studying for the navigation exam?" I nodded, surprised she'd bring it up. We'd been paired for a project, forced to work together. I'd hated it at the time, But there was a moment, her laughing at some stupid joke I made, her hair catching the lamplight, that had stuck with me. I'd buried it deep, but it was still there, sharp and vivid. "You were different then," she said, her eyes on the cave wall. Less guarded. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I watched her. The way the dim light softened her edges made her seem almost human. My chest ached, and not just from my ribs. We left the cave at dawn, driven by the faint hope of rescue. The terrain grew steeper, the air thinner. Riley's ankle gave out twice, and each time I caught her, my hands lingering longer than they needed to. She didn't pull away, but she didn't meet my eyes either. It was maddening, this push and pull, like the mountain itself was testing us. By noon, we spotted a faint trail, old boot prints half buried in the snow. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Ranger station's that way," I said, pointing west. Riley nodded, but her face was tight with pain. "You okay?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Fine," she lied, her voice sharp. I didn't push it. Instead, I took her pack, slinging it over my shoulder despite her protests. "You're slowing us down," I said, trying to keep it light. She glared but didn't argue, and that was progress. The trail led us to a narrow ridge, the drop on either side dizzying. We moved single file, careful and slow. My heart pounded, not just from the altitude, but from the way Riley's presence felt like a live wire, sparking every time we brushed past each other. I hated her, didn't I? So why did my stomach twist every time she stumbled? Then it happened. A loose rock gave way under Riley's foot, and she slipped, her body pitching toward the edge. I grabbed her arm, my boots skidding as I pulled her back. We fell together, landing hard on the trail, her weight pinning me down. Her breath was warm against my cheek, her eyes wide with fear and something else, something that mirrored the chaos in my chest. "Don't do that again," I whispered, my voice shaking. She nodded, her lips parted, and for a moment, I thought she might say something. But she didn't. She just got up, brushing snow off her jacket, and we kept moving. That night, we camped under an overhang, the stars sharp and cold above us. Riley sat close, her knee touching mine. "You saved my life today," she said, her voice barely audible. "Don't let it go to your head," I replied, but my heart wasn't in the jab. She smiled, a real smile, not her usual smirk, and it hit me like a lightning bolt. I didn't hate Riley Harper. I never had. What I felt was something else entirely, something I wasn't ready to name. The cold was a living thing, wrapping around us like a predator. We'd been on the mountain for 3 days, and the ranger station was still a ghost, always just out of reach. My ribs were a constant ache, and Riley's ankle was swollen, her steps uneven despite her stubborn refusal to stop. We followed the faint trail, our breath fogging in the dawn light. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't just the absence of words anymore. It was charged like the air before a storm. I caught myself watching Riley more than the path, noticing the way her jaw clenched when she was in pain, the way her eyes softened when she thought I wasn't looking. It was dangerous, this shift in how I saw her, but I couldn't stop it. "We're running out of food," Riley said, breaking the quiet. She held up the last protein bar, splitting it without asking. Her fingers brushed mine as she handed me my half, and I felt a jolt, like static. "We'll make it," I said, more to convince myself than her. She didn't reply, just chewed her share slowly, her eyes distant. The trail led us to a frozen lake, its surface a mirror of the gray sky. We skirted the edge, careful not to test the ice. "You think anyone's looking for us?" Riley asked, her voice small. It was the first time she'd sounded uncertain, and it unnerved me. "They have to be," I said. "We're too expensive to lose." It was a weak joke, but she laughed, a soft, broken sound that made my chest ache. We found a small clearing to rest, surrounded by pines heavy with snow. I built a fire with the last of our matches, the flames weak but warm. Riley sat close, her hands outstretched, her face lit by the flickering light. "You're good at this," she said, nodding at the fire. "Survival stuff." I shrugged, embarrassed. "My dad was a park ranger. Taught me a few things." Her eyes widened slightly. "You never told me that." I snorted. "You never ask." She looked away, her expression unreadable. "I didn't think you'd want to talk to me." "Not really." Her words hung there, heavy and raw. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap between us, but my tongue felt leaden. Instead, I tossed another stick into the fire, watching the sparks rise. The next morning, we hit a steep incline, the trail all but gone. Riley's ankle was worse, her face pale with pain. "Let me help," I said, offering my arm. She hesitated, then took it, her grip strong despite her exhaustion. We climbed together, our steps synchronized, our breaths mingling in the cold air. It felt right, in a way I couldn't explain. At the top, we found a small plateau with a view that stole my breath, not just because of the altitude. The mountains stretched out, endless and brutal, but there was beauty in their harshness. Riley stood beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "It's gorgeous," she whispered. "Yeah," I said, but I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at her. That night, we shared the last of our water, rationing it carefully. The cold was worse, the wind cutting through our jackets. We pressed close under the blankets, our bodies the only source of warmth. Riley's head rested on my shoulder, her breathing slow and steady. I could feel her heartbeat, faint but strong, and it grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. "Why do you push so hard?" I asked, the question slipping out. She stiffened, then relaxed. "Because I have to," she said. "Growing up, I was the only girl in my family who wanted to fly. My brothers laughed, said I'd never make it. I had to prove them wrong." Her voice was quiet but fierce, and I saw her in a new light, not just the rival I'd built up in my head, but a woman who'd fought for every inch of her place in the world. I wanted to tell her I admired that I saw her strength, and it made me want to be better. But the words stuck, trapped behind years of resentment. Instead, I shifted closer, letting my hand rest near hers. Our fingers brushed, and neither of us pulled away. It was small, but it felt like everything. The next day, we found a ranger station, or what was left of it. A crumbling shack, half buried in snow, with no supplies, no radio. My heart sank, but Riley's face hardened. "We keep going," she said, her voice steady. I nodded, because what else could we do? We were in this together, whether we liked it or not. As we left the station, the sky darkened, another storm brewing. We hurried, desperation driving us. Riley stumbled, and I caught her, our faces inches apart. Her eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I thought she might kiss me, or maybe I wanted her to. But she pulled back, her cheeks flushed. "Let's move," she said, her voice rough. I nodded, my heart pounding, and we pressed on, the unspoken tension between us thicker than the snow. The storm hit us like a freight train, all wind and fury, blotting out the world. Snow stung my face as I shielded my eyes, trying to keep Riley in sight. We were running out of time, out of strength, out of everything. "Stay close," I shouted, my voice swallowed by the gale. Riley nodded, her face barely visible through the blizzard. Her ankle was useless now, forcing her to lean on me. I wrapped an arm around her waist, half carrying her as we stumbled forward. The cold was merciless, seeping into my bones, but Riley's warmth against me was a lifeline, a reminder we were still alive. We found shelter in a shallow cave, barely more than a dent in the rock. It was cramped, but it kept the worst of the storm at bay. We collapsed, panting, our bodies pressed together for warmth. Riley's teeth chattered, her hands shaking as she tucked them under her jacket. "We're not going to make it," she whispered, her voice breaking. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. Don't say that. We're tougher than this damn mountain. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw her without the armor, scared, vulnerable, human. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. For what? I asked, confused. For being such a bitch to you, she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. I thought if I kept you at a distance, I wouldn't, she trailed off, her gaze dropping. My heart thudded. Wouldn't what? I pressed, my voice soft but urgent. She didn't answer, just leaned closer, her forehead resting against mine. Her breath was warm, her lips so close I could feel their heat. My pulse raced, every nerve alive with the nearness of her. I wanted to close the gap, to kiss her, to pour everything I couldn't say into that moment. But I didn't.
Not yet.
The storm raged for hours, trapping us in the cave. We talked to stay awake, to keep the cold from winning. Riley told me about her childhood in Montana, the endless fights with her brothers, the way she'd sneak out to watch planes take off from a nearby airstrip. I told her about my dad, how he'd take me camping in the Rockies, teaching me to read the stars. It was the most we'd ever talked, and it felt like unraveling a knot I hadn't known was there. When the storm finally broke, we emerged into a world transformed, snow piled high, the air sharp and clear. We kept moving, following the faint hope of rescue. Riley's ankle slowed us down, but she refused to stop, her determination a mirror of my own. I admired her, I realized, more than I'd ever let myself admit. By dusk, we found a frozen river, its banks lined with ice-slick rocks. We crossed carefully, but the ice was thinner than it looked. A crack split the air, and Riley went through, plunging into the freezing water. I screamed her name, diving after her. The cold was a shock, stealing my breath, but I grabbed her jacket and pulled, my muscles burning as I dragged her to the bank. She was shivering, her lips blue, her eyes unfocused. Stay with me, Riley, I said, stripping off her wet jacket and wrapping her in my own. I held her close, rubbing her arms, trying to warm her. Her eyes fluttered open, and she grabbed my hand, her grip weak but desperate. I'm scared, Alex, she whispered. I know, I said, my voice thick. But I've got you. We found a dry spot and built a fire, using the last of our kindling. Riley's color slowly returned, but she was still shaking. I held her, my arms around her, my heart pounding with something more than fear. You didn't have to save me, she said, her voice hoarse. Yes, I did, I replied, and the weight of those words hung between us. That night, as we lay under the stars, Riley turned to me. I don't hate you, Alex, she said, her voice soft but clear. I never did. I was scared of what I felt. My breath caught. What do you feel? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Everything, she said, and then she kissed me. It was tentative at first, a brush of lips, like she was testing the waters. Then it deepened, fierce and hungry, all the years of tension pouring out. I kissed her back, my hands in her hair, my heart racing. It was everything I hadn't let myself want, everything I'd buried under anger and pride. When we pulled apart, breathless, she smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made the cold disappear. We're still stuck, she said, her voice light despite everything. Yeah, I said, grinning, but we're stuck together. For the first time, that didn't sound like a curse. The kiss changed everything, like a fault line shifting under our feet. Riley and I didn't talk about it, not directly, but it was there in every glance, every touch. We were still stranded, still fighting for survival, but now there was a new kind of heat between us, burning brighter than the cold. We pushed on, driven by the faint hope of rescue. The river incident had left Riley weaker, her movements slower, but her eyes were fierce, refusing to give up. I carried most of our gear now, my ribs protesting but my resolve stronger. I'd saved her once. I'd do it again if I had to. She was worth it. The terrain grew rougher, the snow deeper. We followed a narrow path along a cliff face, the wind howling below. Riley's hand brushed mine as we walked, and I caught it, lacing our fingers together. She didn't pull away, just squeezed back, her touch grounding me. "You're not so bad, Carter," she said, a teasing edge to her voice. I grinned. "You're not so bad yourself, Harper." We found a small overhang to rest, the cliff shielding us from the wind. Riley leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "What happens when we get out of here?" she asked, her voice quiet. I didn't have an answer, not really. The world beyond the mountain felt distant, unreal. "We figured out," I said, hoping it was enough. She nodded, her fingers tightening around mine. The next day, we spotted smoke in the distance, a thin, gray thread rising from the trees. "Could be a campfire," I said, my heart leaping. "Or a signal." Riley's eyes lit up, hope flickering in them. We moved faster, ignoring the pain in our bodies, driven by the promise of salvation. The smoke led us to a clearing where a small cabin stood, its chimney puffing faintly. It was old, weathered, but intact. We pounded on the door, shouting, but no one answered. The door was unlocked, and inside, we found a miracle: a working radio, a stockpile of canned food, and a stack of blankets. "We're saved," Riley whispered, her voice thick with relief. I fiddled with the radio, static crackling as I searched for a signal. Riley sat close, her knee touching mine, her presence a steady anchor. Finally, a voice broke through, a park ranger, gruff but real. "This is Ranger Station Bravo. Identify yourself." I nearly cried as I gave our names, our location, the details of the crash. "Sit tight," the ranger said. "We're coming for you." We waited, huddled under blankets, the cabin's warmth a stark contrast to the mountain's cruelty. Riley's hand found mine again, her thumb tracing circles on my skin. "I meant what I said," she murmured. "About feeling everything." My heart stuttered. "Me too," I admitted, my voice rough. "I've felt it for a long time. I just didn't know what it was." She looked at me, her eyes soft but intense. "I was scared, Alex. Scared of what it meant, of what people would think. My family, they wouldn't understand." I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. My own family wasn't exactly open-minded. Growing up in a small Colorado town, I'd learned to hide parts of myself, to bury the feelings I didn't have a name for. But here, with Riley, those parts felt alive, real. "I don't care what they think," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "Not anymore." Riley smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. She leaned in, kissing me again, slow and deliberate, like she was memorizing every second. I kissed her back, my hands framing her face, and for a moment, the world was just us. The ranger arrived the next morning, a grizzled man named Tom, who looked like he'd been carved from the mountain itself. He checked our injuries, gave us water, and radioed for a chopper. "You two are lucky," he said, shaking his head. "Most don't survive a crash like that." I glanced at Riley, her hand still in mine, and thought luck had nothing to do with it. We'd fought for every step, every breath. The chopper ride was a blur, the roar of the blades drowning out everything else. Riley sat beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, her fingers laced with mine. We didn't talk, but we didn't need to. The mountain had stripped us bare, forced us to face the truth we'd both been running from. I loved her, and she loved me. The hospital in Denver was a shock of noise and light after the mountain silence. Nurses bustled, machines beeped, and the sterile smell of antiseptic burned my nose. Riley and I were separated for treatment, me for my ribs and head wound, her for her ankle and frostbite. I hated the distance, the sudden absence of her warmth beside me. Lying in my hospital bed, I replayed everything. The crash, the cold, the kiss. It felt like a dream, too vivid to be real. Had I imagined the way Riley looked at me, the way her lips felt against mine? Doubt crept in, cold and heavy. But then I saw her, hobbling and on crutches, her face bruised but smiling. "Miss me, Carter?" she said, and my heart steadied. We were discharged after a day, both of us battered but alive. The company sent a car to take us back to our apartments, and we sat in the back seat, our hands brushing but not quite touching. The city felt wrong, too loud, too fast. I wanted the mountain back, the simplicity of just us against the world. At my apartment, Riley followed me inside, her crutches clicking on the hardwood. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but nervous. I nodded, my stomach twisting. We sat on my couch, the space between us charged with everything we hadn't said. "What happens now?" I asked, echoing her question from the mountain. She took a deep breath, her eyes locked on mine. "I want this," she said, gesturing between us. "I want you. But I'm scared, Alex. My family, my career, it's complicated." I understood, more than she knew. Coming out wasn't just a moment. It was a reckoning, a choice to rewrite your life. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I'd rather face that than lose you." Her eyes softened, and she reached for my hand, her touch warm and sure. "Then we do this together," she said. "Whatever it takes." I nodded, my throat tight, and pulled her close. Her arms wrapped around me, and for the first time in days, I felt safe. The next week was a blur of recovery and questions. The company launched an investigation into the crash, and we were grounded pending the results. Reporters hounded us, wanting the story of our survival, but we kept it vague, guarding the truth of what had happened between us. It was ours, not theirs. Riley came over every night, her crutches propped against my wall, her presence filling the empty spaces in my apartment. We cooked together, laughed over bad TV, and talked about everything, our fears, our dreams, the future we wanted. It wasn't perfect. We argued, our old habits flaring up, but now there was something deeper holding us together. One night, as we lay in bed, Riley traced the scar on my forehead, her touch gentle. "I used to think you were my rival," she said, her voice soft. "But you're more than that. You're my home." My heart swelled, and I kissed her, slow and deep, pouring everything I felt into it. "You're mine too," I whispered and meant it. The investigation dragged on, but we started planning. A new job, maybe somewhere we could start fresh. We talked about moving to Seattle, where the skies were wide and the world felt a little kinder. It was a dream, but it was ours, and that was enough. Spring came to Denver, softening the city's edges with green. Riley and I were cleared to fly again, but we'd made a decision. We were done with the company, done with the life that had kept us at odds for so long. The crash had changed us, stripped away the pretense, and left us with something real. We moved to Seattle in April, a small apartment with a view of the Puget Sound. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Riley's ankle had healed, though she still limped on cold days, and my ribs were better, the scars a reminder of what we'd survived. We found work with a new cargo outfit, smaller, friendlier, where we could fly together without the old rivalries. Coming out was harder. I told my parents over the phone, my voice shaking as I explained who Riley was to me. They didn't understand, not at first, but they listened, and that was a start. Riley's family was tougher. Her brothers didn't take it well, their words cutting deep. But she stood her ground, her hand in mine, and I'd never been prouder. The first time we flew together in Seattle, the sky was clear, the kind of blue that made you believe in second chances. Riley sat in the co-pilot seat, her smile brighter than the sun. "Ready, Captain?" she teased, and I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Always," I said, and we took off, the plane climbing into the endless sky. Looking back, the crash was the worst thing that ever happened to me and the best. It broke us, but it also built us, forging something stronger than hate, stronger than fear. Riley and I weren't perfect. We fought, we doubted, we stumbled. But we loved each other, fiercely and unapologetically, and that was enough. One night, as we stood on our balcony watching the stars, Riley turned to me, her eyes bright. "I'd crash 1,000 planes if it meant finding you," she said. I pulled her close, my heart full. "You already did," I replied, and kissed her, the world falling away until it was just us, together under the wide, forgiving sky.